I'm Helen Bacon and I'm an implementation lead for Triangle, and today I'm going to interview Sara Burns about the Home Star, which is a new version of the original Outcome Star. As a former user, I'm really looking forward to knowing what's different.
Hello, I'm Sara Burns. I'm one of the authors of the suite of Outcome Stars and one of the founding directors of Triangle. And I'm here today because we're about to launch the new Home Star, which is the new edition of the original Outcome Star for homelessness.
So Sara, you've reviewed the Outcome Star, now the new Home Star. So why now?
So the Outcome Star for Housing and Other Needs, which is quite commonly called the Homelessness Star, both internally in Triangle and in the sector, was our first ever Outcome Star. We created the template of it with St Mungo's in 2003, and then working with the London Housing Foundation, we published the Homelessness Star, the Outcome Star, online in 2006. So it's been out there for a long time. We have reviewed it already a couple of times. It's currently in edition 3. But why now is a good question. And actually, we started doing this review 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. And basically because, hearing from people like you working and from people in the sector, we realized a lot has changed. And a lot has changed since the original Outcome Star for Housing and Other Needs. A lot's changed both in terms of the types of clients that access services, also changed in terms of services themselves, also in terms of sort of learning about use of language and how to do this well. We've produced, another 40 plus stars since we originally did this one. So we've learned a lot about what works, and we wanted to bring that learning into this star. But so really the main changes are that in terms of client groups, what we've heard is that there's certainly more women accessing services than there were nearly 20 years ago when we first created this star, and also more people with complex needs, more people for whom sort of independently housed and not needing a service isn't a sort of realistic or helpful aim for them to have. And also, more changes in terms of services, more services having to move people on quickly, being time limited, for example. Also differences in the sort of environment in which people are operating, even more difficult in terms of accessing housing, in terms of people being made homeless. So quite a lot in terms of external factors beyond the control of either the service user or the service to change. And then finally, in terms of language, the stars have always been strengths-based and client-centered, and that's been a really key part of their success over the years. But we've really beefed that up as we've learned more in terms of being particularly more client-centered, and also more trauma-informed, using much more trauma-informed language in the star. So there were lots of reasons, lots we'd heard about why it needed to be updated, and it's been quite a process. We've invested a lot in that over the last 2 years, which has been fantastic.
So who was involved in the process of reviewing the star?
Well, we've had a lot of feedback and a lot of involvement in different levels, and it sort of this review started formally with a roundtable that we hosted last April. But that in itself was inspired, for example, by conversations with MEAN, with Making Every Adult Matter, and also with the Brighton Women's Centre and other services working specifically with women. So they fed in, but also Homeless Link in the UK was very, very helpful, and Crisis, and quite a lot of small services as well, and also quite a lot of services in Australia. For example, one of the Salvation Army services, another service called RUA, and also quite a lot of input internally from people in Triangle, people that do your sorts of role, Helen, and others who have just been listening to lots and lots of people, hearing what people say when they first meet the star in training. And the same for Unique Outcomes, who do all of that work in Australia as well, and New Zealand. Lots of very, very helpful comments back from both Yeah, internally and externally. Anybody that was really interested, basically. But we started the review as well, while alongside following the round table, we just went out to all users of this star. We sent an email to everyone on our list who used the Homelessness Star, and we put out blogs, we put stuff in the newsletter, just saying, if you have a view on what needs to change, just tell us. So we tried to be as open and inclusive and curious as we possibly could be.
That sounds like you've been really inclusive to involve bigger and smaller organisations. So can you tell me what the main changes have been?
So the main changes really are to make the star more appropriate for women as well as men, to make it better fit for people with complex needs for whom self-reliance is not an appropriate endpoint. We've also changed it to the language to be even more client-centered and also more trauma-informed, really sort of bringing in our learning on that. And also we've made some changes to more explicitly recognize external factors beyond the control of both service users and services.
So you talk about trauma-informed there, but what does that mean in practice? How would that appear in the star?
Yeah, I mean, I thank you for asking that. I think it's absolutely fascinating. You know, this has been a really key area of learning. And what it is basically recognizing that a lot of people that would end up needing a homelessness service will have trauma. They'll either have trauma from childhood or from homelessness or from all sorts of they could have been traumatized in all sorts of ways, and that affects how they meet services and how they meet the star. So there's quite a lot of work done around how to make services better meet the needs of people with trauma, and we've tried to bring in the best of that into the star. And some of the things are quite simple, like, for example, if you look at the current edition 3, where you've got the sort of the beginning of the journey of change, that's currently colored red, but actually that's quite a trigger color. So in the new version, we've changed the red into dark gray, which is what we standardly use in all the sort of newer versions of the star that we've created. But also the language needs to recognize. So in the existing version of the star, for example, it might say that somebody is not engaging with support or not talking about something that's a problem, or not recognizing a problem. And that might well be what it looks like from the outside in, but from the inside out, which is what we've tried to do more of in this one, being more trauma informed, what it means is you can't trust the service, or it's not being delivered in a way that works for you, or you've had too many bad experiences in the past of people saying they're going to help and then not being able to, or not delivering. So the beginning stages, particularly in the start, all the language is geared that way. It's just recognizing, you're not getting help, but you might not be getting help because it's not offered in a way that works for you, or for reasons of trauma, you're not able to trust it at this moment in time.
When I've been reading the star, that's one thing that I've really noticed, is that for those people with more complex needs, they're able to kind of go further up the journey of change, and it's sort of more adapted. So actually it might not be working for you yet. So that's a really positive thing that I've noticed. How will it work better for women?
So the Home Star, this new edition, is better suited to the needs of women. And some of the things that we did to bring that in was quite simple, really, about recognizing more about relationships, about possibly having children, about possibly reconnecting with family members that you've lost contact with before. There's also more reference in there to domestic violence, and yeah, I mean, those are the main changes, really. But also, just for example, like you say, somebody could move quite a long way up the scales, even homeless, and you might well get people, I mean, this is a generalization, but happens more with women than men, for example, where, for example, in terms of being able to look after themselves, cooking, etc., that they've got all those skills already, but they haven't got somewhere to live, so it's it's trying to build in all of those different scenarios and having women in mind more when writing it, whereas before, when we first wrote it, it was mostly single homeless men that were the clients it was written for.
I really like the way that it talks about that reconnecting families, because I think that applies for quite a lot of service users where they've kind of lost touch or have not, they need to rebuild some of those relationships. So I think that's really good. One of the things about the Outcome Star I've always noticed is it's always been very client focused, but you talk about this being more client focused and person centered. So how is that?
Yeah, I mean, it is something that we've always, strived to do, to be strengths based, to be client focused, and the Star is by its very nature. But I think one of the main changes in this one, which people remark upon, is that we've renamed the areas of the Star, and that's quite an obvious big change. So, for example, the area that was called, or is currently in the current edition called self-care and living skills, is now called caring for myself and my space. Physical health has moved into my health. Emotional and mental health has been moved into how I feel. So they're very client-centered. They use I and my money, where I'm living. This, all of the scale names. So it's quite a high level, significant change. The actual detail didn't need to change very much in that particular way.
Yeah, so I can see from when you're talking to service users about that, there's definitely more ownership when you're talking about my relationship to my money than before. So how would it work with more complex needs?
What we were also hearing is that more and more there are people coming into services with more complex needs, and having the end point as you don't need a service anymore, it was not appropriate. Particularly if there are sort of learning difficulties or mental health issues that are enduring alongside homelessness. And so what we did was to emphasize more in this new edition that 8 is a top of a scale where you are as well and independent as possible and safe, but you need a service to keep, to maintain that, basically. So 8 will be an end point for people for whom independent self-reliance is not appropriate as a goal. So that's a key way.
So one of the things that I noticed when reviewing the Home Star was that I can imagine that it works really well with people that don't necessarily engage well with traditional services, and actually more outreach, so that they could go much further up that scale where they are engaging and you're able to sort of recognize when they're doing really positive things and really well. So I imagine that works much more flexibly.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad that you've noticed that. That's helpful, that it does seem to work better in that way.
So Sarah, can you tell me what's the difference in the scales with Home Star?
Yeah, so basically we made quite a lot of changes in response to the review feedback. There are 2 scales that we completely rewrote and renamed. And one of those is currently called Offending in edition 3, which we had a lot of feedback on. That one is now called Crime and Safety. And the main change is that we've heard a lot of feedback to say, well, actually, a lot of people who experience homelessness or vulnerability in relation to housing are victims of crime or exploitation. So that scale is really recognizing, well, you might be in trouble with the law, but you might also, or you might be a victim of crime, or you might be being exploited, and that's so it's a rewritten scale that covers both of those things, and people can choose how to complete that according to the person in front of them and what is most relevant at that time. And the other scale that we've sort of completely rewritten was called Motivation and Taking Responsibility, which in the current edition is like the first scale that you come across. And that one has now been reframed to, it's called Trust and Hope. And it's now the final scale that you would, if you were, you obviously you can complete the Star scales in any order, but it's now the final one if you're looking at the Star itself. And basically that changes because what we were hearing is that motivation, if somebody not appearing to be motivated or taking responsibility, is something from the outside in. They don't appear to be doing this. But actually what we're trying to do is turn this round even more so that it's sort of from the inside out. So how does that actually feel for a service user who's coming into a service maybe after sort of decades of people promising things that haven't happened, or with all sorts of trauma in the past? What does it feel like from the inside out? And what we've heard and tried to model in that scale is that what it feels like is you just can't trust these people, or you just have absolutely no hope, no belief that things can be different. So that's what's being modeled through this scale, is now that sense from the inside out of you're getting to have some sense of trust in those people in front of you. And then, around about the middle of the scale, there's maybe more hope, more of a sense of belief, also in yourself and your ability to start to affect things in your life a bit. But it's very much, the inside out rather than the outside in, because even though it was never intended in the current edition, that just even talking about taking responsibility, it sort of implies you're not taking responsibility, which can sound very critical. It was never the intention, but we've heard feedback that can be how it lands. So we've made those changes.
I imagine actually for a worker, that's quite a positive conversation to have about how far do you trust us in the service and how we're going to work together. So it gives them a way to work with that person. That's quite an open way.
So in terms of others, so there's two scales that are completely rewritten, and then there's another 5 scales where there are sort of significant changes. But they're not as big. I mean, one of them was quite straightforward, which was drug and alcohol misuse was another scale that people told us they didn't like. And partly we've just changed the name, so it's now alcohol and drugs, but and obviously taken out that reference to misuse, which is unhelpful. But also the scale has been changed to recognize more explicitly that drinking or using different drugs can be quite a valid and reasonable coping strategy at different points in your journey. So that's recognized in the scale more. Another scale that has changed is around the sort of social networks. I mean, partly social networks is not a good name because social networking has become a much bigger thing about online social networking since we wrote the Star. So we wanted to change the name of it, but also that is now more about sort of friends and relationships. So there's more in there about family and relationships, which is part of this change to be more appropriate to more women, though obviously that applies for quite a lot of men as well. Another scale that has changed significantly is the one that's around where you live. So where I'm living is called at the moment. And that one, I think, as you correctly alluded to earlier, Helen, that one people can move up the scale more, even if they're not in a stable housing situation, because they're engaging in that whole process of getting somewhere appropriate. And there's also more emphasis in it on where somebody's living needing to be safe and needing to be appropriate for them.
So one of the changes to the Outcome Star is the name. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
We've been through quite a big process internally and externally to find the right name. I mean, this one, on its materials is called the Outcome Star because it was the first Outcome Star. And obviously since then we've published another 40 versions or something of the Outcome Star that are all called something else. They all have a strap line of the Outcome Star 4, and that's for but the really key thing in terms of naming a star is that we want the name to be aspirational. We want it to be what you are moving towards. And so when it's referred to as the Homelessness Star, obviously that is just naming the sector, which also isn't very person-centered. And it's also deficit-based. So we try and have the names sort of strengths-based, aspirational, and ultimately what people want is a home or something that, is a meaningful home for them, whatever form that takes. And so although this star is much more holistic than simply finding somewhere to live, and it needs to be so that somebody can actually, manage in that housing when they have got it. In the end, we decided that Home Star was a good name because it says what it is on the tin. It's like, that's what you need. You need a home, you need help to find and keep a home.
I know for me, I really enjoyed that naming the star, because I think the home is not necessarily a building, bricks and mortar. It's who's in that home. If it's living with your dog in the tent because you want to be together, if it is moving to your own tenancy and having a front door, if that's with friends, if that's with family. I think that's really nice that it's flexible to whatever that person's view of home will be.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear. You know, I'm glad it works in that way, you know, because I'm glad that works.
So thank you, Sarah, for talking us through those changes. I think we're excited to hear how it works with service users in practice, and how people are going to experience this. So thank you very much for your time. Where can people find out more about this new Home Star?
Yeah, so thanks, Helen, for having a conversation, and also it's just good to hear your experience as well from having worked in homelessness sectors. So basically, what we're saying to people now is that is to register for a webinar that we're doing on the 17th of March, and that webinar is for people who use the current edition 3 Homelessness Star and want to find out more about the Home Star and what it'll mean for them to switch from one to the other. But also to sort of watch this space, we will be producing more videos, more materials, more resources. Also, if you're on our, if you have a license to use a star, if you're in contact with Triangle at all, you will also receive regular email updates. We'll be doing blogs with the newsletter. So the aim at the moment is, our intention, our timetable is that we are going to be publishing the new Home Star in April, and it will be available from that time for new users of the Star to start using, and also for people to switch to. So between now and April, we will be producing lots of information about what that means. This is the first of a number of different videos. But yeah, really encourage you to register for the webinar on the 17th of March. If you can't make that date but you're interested, let us know by emailing info@triangleconsulting.co.uk, and we'll make sure that you have access to the recording, which will obviously also be on our website. If you have someone you talk to, an implementation lead or regional coordinator, trainer within Triangle, you can talk to them, or just come through to our central client services on info@, and then we'll make sure that your inquiry is dealt with. But thank you very much to Helen for asking the questions, and to all of you for listening, and watch out for more. Thank you.